It seems like everyone is always looking for some good old nostalgia no matter what medium they're into. For video games, it feels like the biggest request of any given company is to remake some of their classics, or just release their old games again. A few years back, Nintendo was releasing their older systems as little mini consoles, but they stopped right before they got to some of the greatest consoles ever. Whatever, I guess. In order to satiate the great nostalgic thirst of the public, companies will often make little trinkets and toys based on their older stuff, like how Nintendo recently partnered with LEGO to make LEGO sets of the NES and Game Boy. On the Game Boy set, you can even put the cartridge inside. It's so cool, but I can't afford that, oh my god. Music isn't safe from this wave of nostalgia either. It may have actually been hit by it the hardest of all. Because despite being invented in the 1880s, vinyl records were the most sought-after way to listen to music on a physical medium in 2024, with estimated revenue being around $1.4 billion, beating out the more modern and convenient option of CDs. And though the tides are always changing, I feel it's safe to say that the humble cassette tape will probably never be able to beat either of them. Ah, the poor cassette tape. During the musical retro renaissance of the late 2000s and early 2010s, vinyl came back big, and cassette tapes always lagged severely behind. Sure, nowadays you can get the latest Taylor Swift or A$AP Rocky on tape, but usually only on their websites. You can't just walk into an FYE or something and find a bunch of cassettes like you can vinyl records. Actually, you can't buy CDs at most FYEs anymore either. And if you can, all their stuff is super expensive now. The other week, my nearest FYE wanted damn near $100 for My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy on vinyl. I mean, what kind of idiot would buy that? Anyway, that's all besides the point. The reason these places don't stock cassettes is because they don't sell super well. That's probably because cassettes don't seem to have much surface level appeal to the average consumer. Cassettes can't go track by track like CDs can, and like vinyls sort of can with enough precision. Cassettes have the worst sound quality and degrade faster than the other two. Plus, they come in small shells, so you can't hang them up on your wall and let everyone who enters your house know just exactly how much you really like that one Tame Impala album with the ball on the cover. Now that I'm really thinking about it, what reason does anyone have to like cassette tapes anyway? You'd have to be a very sick man to enjoy them. Well, I want to tell you that I actually collect cassette tapes.
What?
I have for years. I mean, they gotta be selling these things to somebody, right? The answer is mostly Gen Z hipsters. And me. I don't know, I'm not trying to be counterculture or different, really I'm not. I just like that they're so small, and it's cool that they put music on cartridges. It's like they put music on a Game Boy cartridge, except that instead of having Super Mario Land on it, instead it has Breed. Thankfully, there is a special Game Boy I can play these special music cartridges on, and that would be the topic of this video, the officially licensed Nintendo Cassette Boy. Not much has been documented on the Cassette Boy, but what I can tell you is that it wasn't made during this recent retro resurgence. It was actually made at the tail end of the golden era of cassette tapes around 1992-1993 by a company called Manny Limited. A very specific type of Nintendo scholar may recognize that name. They actually have quite an interesting history with Nintendo. So before we take a look at the Cassette Boy, let's dig a little deeper and take a trip to Hong Kong. Manny Limited is a Hong Kong-based private company specializing in toy manufacturing. Incorporated on May 30th, 1991 under the name Tana Limited, they had renamed themselves to Manny as early as August 8th of the same year. Now here's where things get interesting. From here on, I'm going to tell this story a little backwards, you know, for a dramatic effect. Also, full disclosure, a lot of this section is sourced from a 2013 write-up by Metal Maniac, which was translated by IQ Brew. A full list of all of my sources will be in the description below. On April 7th, 2005, Nintendo founded its Hong Kong branch of operations. But before that, starting in 1994, it was Manny Limited that handled the distribution of Nintendo products in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, and until the founding of IQ in 2002, mainland China as well. IQ has its own detailed and much more documented history involving neat little oddities like the IQ Player, which was basically a plug-and-play Nintendo 64. Though for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep the IQ talks brief. IQ Limited was founded in 2002 as a joint venture between Nintendo and Taiwanese-American technologist and entrepreneur Wei Yan, with the goal of the company being a new, superior way to bring Nintendo products to mainland China. This was needed because in 2000, China's State Council had passed a bill banning the sale of video game consoles within the country, meaning the IQ Player was only allowed to be released 3 years later via a loophole, saying that it's not technically a video game console, but instead a plug-and-play toy. The other reason for IQ's creation was that Nintendo had allegedly grown frustrated with Manny's hands-off approach to combating piracy in mainland China. Now, take this with a grain of salt, but according to IGDB, which is owned by Twitch but is also publicly editable, so again, grain of salt. But Nintendo was allegedly so furious with Manny at this time that they revoked their distribution rights around 1997-1998 and handed them over to the Chinese toy company Aldi. I couldn't find a verifiable source for this claim, but I did find an entry on console variations for an atomic purple Game Boy Pocket that Aldi released, however only in China. So if this is true, it likely just means that Manny was booted out of China a little earlier than 2002. Anyway, back to Manny. Focusing specifically on their country of origin, Hong Kong, it seems like their reign was from 1994 to 2004-2005. The systems I could find that Manny verifiably produced for Hong Kong are the Famicom, Super Famicom, Game Boy Color, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Advance, SP, and the original Nintendo DS. The original DS first launched in North America on November 21st, 2004, so assuming this Hong Kong and Macau model came out soon after, that would place it right before the formation of Nintendo's Hong Kong branch, which all tracks. From what I can tell, the Game Boy ended up being their biggest success, perhaps thanks to a marketing strategy revolving around Hong Kong actor and musician Aaron Kwok, including promotional packaging and a commercial. Manny even released a good few official cartridges, at least in mainland China. Though Manny is still operating to this day, producing toys within Hong Kong and surrounding regions, their current relationship with Nintendo is sort of ambiguous. Again, take this with a grain of salt, but IGDB claims that Hong Kong versions of the Nintendo Switch produced within the launch year of 2017 would display Manny as their distributor. I couldn't find any videos or photos of this, but I found it interesting and worth noting nonetheless. I also found a Reddit commenter claiming that Manny does still work with Nintendo, as well as Takara Tomy, so let's just believe that and call it a happy ending. Now at this point you might be wondering how this all relates back to the Cassette Boy, and for that let's turn the clock back one more time to the founding of Manny in 1991. While Manny didn't start bringing Nintendo products to Hong Kong and other regions until 1994, this is just speculation, but perhaps this deal could only have happened because Nintendo was already working with Manny to produce and license Nintendo-themed toys for the American market. From 1992 to 1997, Manny was producing a wide variety of different trinkets, all licensed by Nintendo. These include Mario and Yoshi themed keychains, bump and go toys, pullback toys, and wristwatches, Super Mario Kart themed keychains, pullback toys, and wristwatches, Donkey Kong Country themed keychains and wristwatches, N64 clock and voice memo keychains, and an entire line of Game Boy themed electronics. The Radio Boy, Game Watch Boy, Calculator Boy, Time Boy, Watch Boy, which is different from the Time Boy, Walkie Talkie Boy, and of course, the Cassette Boy. These boys were all produced between 1992 and 1993. All of these toys are now vintage and wildly expensive, so I unfortunately can't do a deeper dive on them. Thankfully though, a much younger and stupider LimeJinjo found out about the Cassette Boy a long time ago and got a brand new one for fairly cheap, so that we can now analyze it today, years later. So without further ado, let's take an in-depth look at the Nintendo Cassette Boy. Unfortunately, I've lost my original box and the shitty little headphones that came with the Cassette Boy. I know, stop throwing tomatoes at me, please. However, I was able to find a few different photos of the box online, so we can still have a look. The front box features an original illustration of Mario, Bowser, Yoshi, Peach, Koopa Troopa, and of course, famous Mario characters, Chicken and Batadon as well. Can't forget about them. They're all flying high above the world, listening to music on their Cassette Boys. Yoshi, Koopa Troopa, Bowser, Mario, and Peach are all riding on top of differently colored music notes as well. It's truly a beautiful scene. I'll give you a second to pause and admire it. Okay, that's enough. Turning over to the back of the box, we see a list of some of the player's features and a diagram of the device. It reads, metallic deck with play, fast forward, stop, and auto stop function, stereo earphone, removable belt clip, DC input jack DC3V, and battery 2AA UM3 batteries to be used, not included. We'll be getting back to these. I'm going to attempt to verify all of these during the hands-on review. It seems there are actually two versions of the original Cassette Boy, one that came with earphones and one that did not. If we look at the back of the box for the one without headphones, we'll see that all it has on the bottom is copyright information, dated 1993. However, the one that came with headphones, which is the unit I own, has additional information crediting Prima Merchandise Inc. as the sole distributor of this product in America. If we take a look at the other Boy devices, we'll see that Prima distributed most of these as well. I took the liberty of trying to look into Prima, but they're a complete dead end. I couldn't find them in any company registries, and it seems like they're no longer located at the address listed on the box. It's possible they went out of business, though I can't say for sure. There were two other distributors for Manny that I saw on some of the other toy boxes as well. Impact Distributors is similarly a dead end, but the last one, Pelican Accessories, would later be bought by Turtle Beach and change their name to PDP, creators of video game accessories like the Rift Master. Alright, enough about the box, it's time we go hands-on with the device itself. For reference, I'll be comparing the Cassette Boy to this newer cassette player, the FIO CP13, which is a fairly decent option for a modern cassette player that some of you tape heads have probably heard of. First, let's take a look at the physical dimensions of this thing. The Cassette Boy is a bit of a chunky unit. It's about 4.5 inches long, 1.25 inches tall, and about 3.5 inches wide. The FIO is a bit longer and slightly thinner, but they're about the same width. Comparing it to a normal Game Boy, the Cassette Boy is fatter, shorter, and wider than the real thing. The buttons on the front of the Cassette Boy are, of course, fake. They're made of hard plastic and cannot be pressed down. Naturally, the screen is also fake, but interestingly enough, it isn't just a sticker. It seems to actually be covered by a clear piece of plastic, and the sticker of Mario with his Cassette Boy is stuck to the inside of the device. So theoretically, if I remove this sticker, I'd be able to peek in at the tape while it's playing. But Mario looks so happy in here, and I don't want to ruin it for him, so he will remain as is. Let's look at the real buttons now. There are only 3 of them on the side of the device. Nice big oval shaped buttons. From the top down we have play, fast forward, and stop. Annoyingly, there is no rewind button, so in order to rewind a tape, you have to flip it over to the other side, fast forward, and then flip it back. Regardless, if you have any other option at all, I wouldn't recommend fast forwarding with this particular device, as it's incredibly slow. I ran some speed tests on it, and it seemed to fast forward at 1.2 times speed. For comparison, the FIO seemed to fast forward at 16 times speed. While we're still on the topic of buttons, you may have noticed that the Cassette Boy doesn't have a record button. It is purely a device for listening to music. No making mixtapes or dictating notes into it. The back of the box also mentioned it has an auto stop feature, which is when the cassette player automatically stops spinning the tape once you've reached the end of one side. I verified that while it does have an auto stop and I can hear it stop winding the tape, it doesn't actually shut off. It doesn't pop the play button back up and start saving its battery or anything like that. It just keeps running until you press the stop button yourself. At the top of the device, you'll see the stereo headphone jack and what they call a volume knob, despite the fact that it's actually a volume wheel. I did test to see if this thing truly outputs into stereo, and thanks to the help of King Crimson, I can confirm that it does. On the back of the device, you'll see the removable belt clip, which is a nice touch and very fun to fiddle with. You'll also see the spot to put your batteries in. It takes 2 AA's that fit very snugly inside, maybe a bit too snugly. One of the batteries seems to be sort of bulging upwards from the lack of room, which can make it difficult to put the battery lid back on. To the right of the belt clip, we can see the Manny logo, and below it some copyright information. Interestingly enough, the device itself says 1992 on it, while the box said 1993. It also says patent pending, which I don't think I've ever seen printed straight onto a released product before. The bottom of the device is where the 3-volt DC jack is located. I haven't tested this, and I'm not gonna lie, it's because I'm kinda scared to. I just get a bad feeling from that plug, man, some bad mojo. I'm sure it's fine, but I don't want to test fate. And I also don't want to go digging for a 3-volt DC jack charger. Now before we get to the sound test, let me answer a few questions that tape heads might be asking. First of all, I don't believe this thing has any noise reduction built into it. There's no mention of it on the device or the box, and once you hear this thing, I think you'll agree it sounds like there likely isn't any. Is there a speed adjuster on this thing? Yes, though annoyingly it's in a spot where you can't adjust it and listen to a tape at the same time. It's on the top right when you open the door flap. Lastly, Type 2 and Type 4 tape compatibility. A brief history for the non-tape heads watching this video. Cassette tapes came in 4 distinct types that had varying levels of sound quality. Type 1 ferric cassettes are the cheapest and most common. 99% of pre-recorded tapes you see will be ferric, especially with modern releases. Type 2 chrome cassettes are much rarer, and big cassette decks usually have special settings to get them to play and sound at their best possible quality. Type 3 cassettes were a special mix of Type 1 and Type 2 called ferrochrome, but these are exceedingly rare. Type 4 are metal cassette tapes, and while they easily sound the best out of any type, they're pretty rare and very expensive. I don't own any Type 4 metal tapes, but I do own a few pre-recorded Type 2 chrome tapes, like this single of Only Happy When It Rains by Garbage. And while the Cassette Boy can physically play them, it doesn't sound to me like it was designed to do so. Alright, it's time for the most important part, the sound test. For this, I'm simply going to play some tapes via a direct line from the cassette player straight into Audacity, and let you compare them back and forth. I've got two tapes with different types of music to test this with. I've got this 2017 Ferric cassette indie release from lo-fi hip-hop collective Radio Waves, which are going to play a song from Alan Thomas off of. Great stuff, I'll link to both Alan Thomas and this Radio Waves album in the description. After that, I have this 1993 Ferric cassette of Bach that also features a lot of talking. It's like an audiobook about his life that has talking and music in the background. It's interesting. Now let's have a listen to them.
Yo, I tend to slur so they can't understand my lingo. Unwrapping that box like it was straight from Kris Kringle. Then I try to hit all the boxes like bingo. Forgot about the queen, now your guy is living single. I used to beat it in the back just like Ringo. But it's all groove, your dude stay down to mingle. Floating off that green like a skinny black tingle.
Well, I have to be honest, it's not too bad. I'm not sure how it's going to come off on video, but when you listen to each device with headphones, the FIO is the clear winner. Even after adjusting the speed on the Cassette Boy, it still seems to have a fair bit of wow and flutter, and I swear it's producing more hiss than the FIO. But you also have to remember this cassette player is 33 to 34 years old, and while I only opened and started using it about 8 years ago, it's still probably somewhat deteriorated. But don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting either of these things to compare to actual high-end cassette players anyway. Is the Cassette Boy worth its price nowadays? Hell no. This thing fetches a couple hundred no matter its condition, and it seems to go up every year. Unless you think it looks really cool, and you're really into Nintendo and cassette tapes like I am, and you have a rather large disposable income like I don't, this thing is probably not worth your time. But would it have been worth its MSRP? That's hard to say. I looked through a bunch of Nintendo Power, Radio Shack, and Toys R Us magazines from its time, and I couldn't find a single advertisement for this thing. So I have no idea how much it went for when it was released. But let's do the math real quick to see if we can estimate. Alright, average price for cassette player $19.93, plus a Nintendo Sax. Let's say about $50 in 1993, which, adjusting for inflation in 2026, would be $112, so still no. And that's everything I have on the Cassette Boy. But what's that, you ask? What was Nintendo's history with cassette players after the Cassette Boy? Well, that's a very strange question to ask, but I'm glad you're finally beginning to show some interest in this. Nintendo actually had a few more cassette players over the next couple of years. Around 1999, Nintendo re-released the Cassette Boy in new colored shells under the name Cassette Boy Color. These devices seem identical to the original Cassette Boy we just looked at, but the release of these ones was mostly handled by Interact Accessories, which you may recognize as being the original publishers of the Game Shark. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Nintendo also put out various cassette players based on the Nintendo 64, GameCube, and Game Boy Advance. I was able to find one based on the GBA, two based on the GameCube, and a whopping 4 based on the N64, plus this absolutely ridiculous N64 boombox. And that's actually it. That's everything I could find on this little dinky cassette player that led me down a little rabbit hole of other cassette players, toys, and Hong Kong. Thanks for watching. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to listen to my little cartridges that have music on them. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And I think my videos can get hyped now, so if you want to do that too, you can. Special thanks to Alan Thomas for letting me use his song in the sound test portion of the video. I'll link to his stuff in the description below, check it out. That's all, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.